I'm talking about the man on the liquors. Go over here. Bob. I'm talking about the man on the liquors. I'm talking about the man on the liquors. But then we gotta type. There you go. Actually, let me see. Am I even? Yeah, I can be heard. Yeah, I'm chilling in that department, but. Give me 1 second, please. I'm talking about the man on the Lakers. There you go, fine. I don't know why it was bugging out before. Alrighty. That's all set. No, don't save it. Close you. Alright, so we're back, back with Subwitch on a Holy Night. Sorry for the prolonged silence. I had to make the thumbnail for the stream, so we're back. Last time we read the archives of Kamari and Souyjuro and all that interesting stuff, but now we're gonna move on to chapter 8. Are you for real? Misaki High School's winter vacation began in mid-December. The tranquil air of the school was a refreshing change of pace from the more competitive schools, internationally famous sports. Excuse me, nationally, I'm dyslexic already. Internationally famous sports teams and exam-oriented curriculum. The empty, newly constructed building evoked images of pure white swan descending upon a still winter lake. The modern school felt alive in its stillness, in spite of the absence of its lifeblood of students. Most students never knew what this building used to look like. It was just a small, run-down wooden building, a shadow of its former self. The former school was never torn down and now stood in lonely silence. It was tucked away deep in a seemingly infinite wood that stretched across the mountains. The sound of brooms sweeping dead leaves resonated in the air. The ocean of leaves had accumulated into piles as big as sand dunes. Sweeping was a futile venture at this point. An ominous feeling lingered in the air, perhaps the result of 2 years of abandonment. The October sky is looking ominous. Cleaning the inside of the building alone would take more than a few days to finish. Not to mention, The misguided youth sent here for the job wasted no time making it clear he wanted no part in the beautification efforts.
っていうかジャージでやらせんなよ。ジャンパーぐらい着させろよな。何これ、もしかして体育の報酬、寒中マラソン。俺体育だけはサボったことねえんすけどね。
Hosuke Kinomi continued to mumble and grumble to himself as he reluctantly swept away at the ground. Meanwhile, Souyjuro silently and swiftly continued his sweeping, glaring at Kinomi out of the corner of his eye.
おい、何真面目にやってんだよ。こんなの適当でいいんだって。だいたい40人しかいねえのにこんな山みたいな庭の掃除なんか終わるかってんだよ。
終わらないことなんてない。少しうるさいぞ、木の実は。
Kinomi went back to idly swinging his broom without even glancing over at Souyjuro. They're giving me ads on my TV. They're giving me ads on my TV and they're trying to leave. I didn't even know there was going to be a new Snow White movie. That's crazy. Almost heard nothing about it. Then again, maybe I'm not the target demographic, so that's why I haven't heard anything about it. Anyways, but just putting something on in the background on my TV. Kinomi, oh, I already read that. Mornings on the mountain were cold. There was no hint of sun in the cloudy sky above. Ash gray light illuminated the rear courtyard. The sharp cold of midwinter pierced through everyone's gloves as if they did not exist. A day like this was best spent indoors under warm blankets, but for some reason, they were out here cleaning. The Special Winter Cleaning Team. That was the name given to the elite force sent to clean up this dilapidated, overgrown mountain. The other students had put their faith into this team to fulfill this beautification mission, respecting them for their sacrifice. The reality, however, was that this was nothing more than a ragtag, dare-losing gang of students needing remedial lessons before their exams. They were the victims of a year-long arm-twisting scheme by the student council. Who in their right mind would come out here sweeping up leaves with a blizzard looming on the horizon? Other than one of the 40 assembled, none of them had any semblance of interest in the task at hand.
おい、見ろよ、しずき。赤羽たち向こうで焼き芋とかレトロな真似してやがる。な、二番煎じはいかにも頭悪いしな。そうだ、俺たちはイカでも焼かねえ。
Kinomi did not want to be here to begin with, and was constantly trying to break Souyjuro into joining him. The cleaning squad was divided into groups. Souyjuro and Kinomi were in charge of cleaning behind the gymnasium. Souyjuro was the leader of the platoon. Kinomi was the grunt.
こことあっちの垣根をきれいにしたら、焼き芋だろうと焼きイカだろうと猫鍋だろうと好きにしよう。
That's crazy. I just noticed that you could see his bandage, and nobody's questioning it. Souyjuro said as he expertly packed his swept leaves into trash bags. 2 hours had passed since they assembled on this foggy morning at 7 o'clock. Wow, so it's only 9? Dang, that dude's at 7? That sounds so boring. Golly. Oh man, while everyone else chatted and laughed as they worked, Souyjuro alone had worked in complete silence at the same blistering pace as he started. The sheer amount of work, I forgot to do something, wow. Well, that sucks. I forgot to do that before I started streaming. Oh well. I'll do it once I'm done. The sheer amount of work he put in was likely the only thing keeping him from complaining of the cold in his thin jersey.
やめようぜ。見ろ、そこの池、スケートリンク。やっぱ池？とにかくそこの池らしきものだってカチカチに凍ってるぐらいなんだぜ。こんな雪原じゃ人体は普通動かねえよ。機械伯爵でもなきゃだよ。そろそろ人間狩りが始まるよ。なんでいい加減休憩しね。せっかく枯れ葉集めたんだから燃やして温まんないとさ。 どうせ監視役は殿下しかいないんだしさ。なあ、焼きイカやろうぜ。焼きイカ。
For some reason, Kenomi was droning on about his squid. Souyjuro had managed to withstand a barrage of complaints from his comrade, but even he was reaching his
木
limit.
の実頼むから。
There he is. Tobimaru. Oh man. Why does he look so posh? Just then, Souyjuro saw the Grim Reaper himself creeping behind Kenomi. In his hands, he held a rake instead of a soft bamboo broom.
いいぜ。お前がイカなんてもんを用意してるほどの大人物だってんなら、慎んでイカ焼きぐらい許可してやるよ。
Kenomi shot to attention at the voice behind him.
その物言い、築地何がし。
Before quickly turning around, swinging his broom in the process. Tobimaru easily Wow! Why are you trying to kill him?
ああ、てめえ、やる気十分じゃねえか。溢れる労働意欲を抑えきれないってわけか。なんならシベリアコースにでも行っちまうか。
女ども集めて焼却炉に陣取ってる野郎の言葉なんざ聞かねえよ。真冬に南国気分とかマジ寒いわ。
Both boys glared at each other with a wry smile. Broom and rake locked in an embrace. These two were only friendly with each other on school grounds.
飛び丸、一応彼は戦力なんだから邪魔しないでくれ。
Both of them scoffed angrily and put their weapons away. They both knew better than to argue with Souyjuro, the only one cleaning with a garbage bag in hand.
それで何しに来たんだ飛び丸。君はあったかい焼却炉の前で永遠に火の管理をすると豪語していたんじゃなかったっけ。
Oh, at least Souyjuro knows. A harsh comment. Apparently, even Souyjuro had a slight taste for drama.
なんてこった。善良な生徒ですら、俺をそんな目で見るのか。
Tobimaru seemed sad at Sojuro's observation. As long as Tobimaru continued to claim he was helping the girls clean by doing nothing more than standing in front of a pile of burning leaves, Souyjuro found it hard to sympathize.
いいから要件を言えよ。殿下と違って俺らは暇じゃねえんだ。
You're doing nothing. What?
ああ、そうかよ。宗次郎、そろそろ小休止だ。向こうで温まろうよ。
お、なんだブレイクかよ。話せるじゃん殿下。
ああ、てめえは除外に決まってんだろ。特権は功労者にのみ与えられるもんだ。焼却炉の前に来たけりゃ、それ相応の貢ぎ物を持ってきやがれ。具体的に言うと、リアカー1台分のゴミ袋な。
ひでえ、生徒会応募。
Kinomi's complaints naturally fell on deaf ears. Tobimaru had been selected to lead the cleaning operation, and his word was final. If Kenomi were to continue to push his buttons, he knew he would be on cleaning duty tomorrow and the next day too.
さあ、行くぞ。誰の趣味か知らねえが、なぜか知る子の感が山ほどあってな。中華まんの一つでもあった方が気が利くってもんなんだがね。あれか、遭難用のチョコレートみたいなもんか。ったく、あいつの考えは未だにわかんねえな。
Soujuro reassured Tobimaru by saying that he thought the food would do just fine for everyone.
なんだよ、行かねえのか、宗次郎。
ああ、自分はここに残るよ。旦なら木の実の言うように葉を燃やせばいい。そこに池もある。火の始末なら安心だ。
What? There you go. Okay, I'm about to say, what do you mean the stream was 1 year ago? That's not true. This is clearly for Konomi's benefit. Tobimaru furrowed his brow while Konomi shivered from the cold.
俺は今友情ってもんを実感している。すげえな、真心って本当にあったんだ。さあ待ってろしずき、今赤羽たちから芋を奪ってくる。
Perhaps shy to show his true feelings, Kenobi ran off to the neighboring group.
な、予想はしてたけどな。ほらよ。
Tobimaru pulled out a hot can from his jersey pocket, scratching his head in exacerbation. He pulled out 3 in all, one from each jersey pocket and one from his pants
さっ
pocket.
さと焚き火の用意をしようぜ。俺もこっちで休むことにするわ。
付き合いがいいのはお互い様だな。
Souyjuro quickly prepared the leaves for the fire, carefully gathering them up for them to burn neatly.
慣れてるな。
マッチがあるから楽なんだ。
Souyjuro crouched down in front of the burning leaves and warmed his hands over the fire. Near the flames, wow. Even though he showed no signs of being cold, underneath it all, Souyjuro was cold too. He gazed into the fire as the smoke rose from the pile of leaves, as if remembering the good times from his past. Tobimaru felt a touch of concern as he looked at Souyjuro. He saw within him homesickness and retrospection. He also saw a dark shadow looming over him, like a stranger in a foreign land without a home.
元気ねえな、宗次郎。
まあね、少し疲れてる。
悩み事なら相談に乗るぜ。気が向いたら話してくれ。
Tobimaru continued speaking with the pull tab from the can of sweet red bean soup still around his index finger. Souyjuro was focused on the fire.
そういえばな、お前が学校休んでる時、青崎に殴られたぜ。な、
Oh, dang.
大抜擢じゃないか。
そういえばな、お前が学校休んでる時、青崎に殴られたぜ。なんでも俺は大ボラ吹きだそうだ。
Sometimes Souyjuro would reply incoherently like this. Tobimaru chalked it up to cultural differences.
なあ、青崎とはどうなってんだ？テスト前は駅まで一緒に帰ってただろ？うまくいってんのか？あれから。
It was obvious to everyone that was far from the case, yet Tobimaru asked anyway.
ああ、今は一緒に住んでるよ。
Souyjuro went with the truthful, blunt response.
ああ、そうか。一緒と来たか。
Tobimaru tried to laugh off Sojuro's all too casual confession. However,
一緒に住んでるぞ。
どうした飛び丸。火でも飛んだか？
飛んでねえし、それより怖え。おい、今の聞き捨てならねえたわごとは本当の話か？
Souyjuro protested Tobimaru's reply with silence.
その余裕、マジか。女に興味なさそうな顔してて、やることやってんじゃないかてめえ。
Tobimaru had always felt that he and Souyjuro were on equal match strength-wise, but for some reason, he could not shake the feeling that Souyjuro was now his superior in the brain department. Souyjuro cast a rare, angry glare in Tobimaru's
こ
direction.
っちこそ聞き捨てならない。なんだ、その女に興味はないってのは。
Souyjuro seemed genuinely angry, and his voice was icy. This uncharacteristic level of anger from Souyjuro was enough to get Tobimaru to back down.
いや、悪い。そんな雰囲気あったんだよ、お前さんは。それは謝る。けどよ、青崎と一緒に住んでるってどういうことだ？いくらなんでも一足飛びすぎだろ。
別に君が期待しているようなことはない。彼女が住んでいるところの部屋を借りることになっただけだ。屋根の裏にある部屋なんだけど、板張りで山小屋を思い出すんで気に入ってる。
Tobimaru did not bat an eyelid at hearing that Souyjuro now lived in an attic, and continued his questioning.
屋敷ってあのクオンジの屋敷か？それこそまさかだぜ。宗十郎、お前一体どんな手品を使いやがった？
飛丸こそあの家を知ってるのか？
そりゃな。これでも月次家期待の跡取り候補だぜ、俺は。クオンジグループのご令嬢が住んでる屋敷ぐらいは知ってるさ。 霊園女学院の2年生だろ確か。
クオンジ何？
Sojo was looking more confused than ever, so Tobimaru reluctantly explained everything as simply as he could so Sojo could understand.
クオンジグループつうか財団だな。平たく言えば一族全部がお金持ちで仲良く会社を経営してる連中だと思えばいい。複合企業とまではいかないが輸出業じゃかなりのもんだ。ホームグラウンドは国外で先代の会長の英国 B 機がたたって一時期は沈みかけてたんだが5年くらい前かね。本拠地をこっちに移してからはご存知の通りだ。会長が息子に移ってからはきちんと持ち直して今や町の名士だろ。ここでもクオンジの名前はそこかしこで目に入る。この学校の立て直し予算の半分は連中からだしな。
Despite the oversimplified explanation, Sojo still seemed to not be getting it. With that, Tobimaru decided to give up on trying to explain.
あれだ。想像もできない金持ちってこと。総の字が働いてる喫茶店だってクオンジが向こうから持ってきたブランドだぜ。今じゃ全国チェーンになっちまったがな。
つまりすごく偉いんだね。おかしいな。ならなんであんなに倹約してるんだろう。
Sojo mumbled incoherently to himself. Tobimaru looked at him with a complex expression on his face, somewhere between envy and heartfelt
し
sympathy.
かしうまいことやったな宗十郎。それで本当のところはどうなんだ。男と女が同じ屋根の下にいれば。
Wow, that is raunchy. Oh my goodness.
案外古いな、飛び
抜かせ。そのあたりをごまかしてたら男なんざやってらんねえ。
そりゃごもっとだ。実を言うと
Though Sojo and Alko were living together, there was absolutely no chemistry between them. Though that was not to say that living in such close quarters as they did, unintended mishaps did not occur from time to time. But even still,
驚くぐらいそういうことにはなってない。あの屋敷すごく広いし。
everyone was often busy with their own affairs, so there was no opportunity for that sort of thing to happen.
そもそもだな。もし飛び丸だったら下宿先が同じってことだけで青崎に言い寄る気になるかい？
いやならねえなそれ。
Togimaru nodded intently, as if he was thinking back over his many.
いや健全だな。
ああ、健全だろ。
Soujuro gave no more than a quick affirmation to Tobimaru's despondent murmur. He was doing fine. But besides his physical health, it was surely Soujuro's personality that enabled him to maintain any semblance of peace dealing with both Alko and Alice while living in that mansion.
でもそれとは別の話で青崎に頭が当たらないんだ。彼女にはもう返せない借りがあってさ。
Soujuro's eyes turned slightly serious as he stared into the fire. Tobimaru felt that there was more to these words than what Soujuro was setting on.
もう返せない借りだ。
Soujuro merely nodded in silence at Tobimaru's inquisitive acknowledgement. And just then, a strange scream pierced through the still silence of the wood like an... Oh, wow, man, I'm so literate. Golly. A strange scream pierced through the still silence of the wood like a knife.
なんか聞こえたな。
ああ、木の実だ。
Soujuro had already stood up before he responded. He bolted to the frozen pond, broke the ice with his broom, scooped up some of the frigid water in a bucket, and threw it on the fire. All in less than 10. Wow, bro is gaming. He then immediately ran off into the woods, deep into the depths of the woods from where he heard the scream. Tobimaru followed after him in panic confusion.
飛び丸、この先に何かあるのか？
確か旧校舎が残ってるはずだ。
他には野犬の住処とかそういう嫌な話は？
はあ？いや、いるとしても鹿かウサギじゃねえか。
なら怖がることもないか。急ごう、飛び丸。
Perhaps because of his time spent growing up in the mountains, Soujiro quickly sprinted over the slippery dead leaves. Toyomaru was not particularly cautious himself, but nevertheless he could not keep up with Soujiro in here. Before long, Soujiro found himself running alone. When foliage blocked the natural trail, he would sometimes clear it away by brute force, but just as often, he would expertly weave through the bush. It was clear that he was used to dealing with this level of nature. After a few minutes, Soujiro arrived at the clearing. The wall of trees had ended. It was obviously man-made clearing here on the mountainside. In the distance, what looked like an old wooden school building. It was a small, aesthetically pleasing building no larger than an elementary school, lost in the depths of a winter wilderness.
Kinomi!
Kinomi stood alone on the old school's grounds.
なんでしずきまで追いかけてきたん？
What are you doing here? What? A sour expression came over Soujiro's face as Kinomi tilted his head in confusion.
そっちこそどうしたんだ？変な声上げて。
声？いや、そりゃガキ相手に怒鳴ったけどよ。ほら、あのガキだよ。芋持ってるだろ。で、中に逃げ込みやがった。
Kinomi pointed resentfully toward the old school building. There was indeed somebody standing at the entrance to the building just over 300 feet in the distance.
たく、こんな上まで来やがって。いつから子供の遊び場になってんだ、ここ。
Kinomi shrugged his shoulders to signal how little he cared what the Kinomi shrugged his shoulders to signal how little he cared what the young children did with their time. This place was deep in the woods, but it was not particularly dangerous. Soujiro had ran through the woods to get here, but there was also a paved road leading to the spot from outside the woods. Oh, from outside the woods too. Kinomi apparently followed that road to get here. Soujiro squinted.
なあ、金髪なんでさっきはちょっと驚いたけどな。外国人の子供ってなんか怖いだろ？
It was indeed quite rare to see a foreigner in a provincial town such as Misaki. Soujiro had never seen a foreigner in person, which made the whole thing even more mysterious.
それで、木の実はなんでここまで？
いや、赤羽たちがよ、ガキに食料を奪われたって言うからここまで追いかけてきたんだ。そういうことだから、二人がかりであのお子様とっちめようぜ。
怖いことを考えるな、木の実は。
Soujiro could not find it in him to agree with his plan. It seemed unfair to team up against a little kid.
いいから帰ろう。あの子こっちを睨んでるじゃないか。それに飛び丸にこんなところ見られたら、冬休み中ずっと山の掃除で終わることになるぞ。
Soujiro took Kinomi by the shoulders and began leading him back to the path he came from. Kinomi cast one last gaze at the old school building before reluctantly following. Huh?
So, ¿tú tienes comida ahí? Es que tú compras comida. ¿No quieres arroz con carne?
Déjalo ahí, yo lo cojo más tarde.
Bueno, y hay habichuela ahí en la nevera.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Alrighty. I think, no, whatever, it doesn't hurt. Kinomi cast one last gaze at the old school building before reluctantly following. Just then, Tobimaru appeared, panting and out of breath.
早いな、宗十郎。
Tobimaru could hardly catch his breath. He arrived about 3 minutes behind Soujiro, despite having a good set of legs on
それ
him.
でどうした？木の実、無事か？
はあ？無事も何も殿下こそどったん。
Kinomi seems perplexed at Tobimaru's first ever display of concern for him.
なんだそりゃ。てめえ、 あれだけの大声を上げておいてしらばっくれる気か。上で何かあったんだろうが。
すまない、こっちの早とちりだった。飛び丸は知らないだろうけど、木の実を時々バイト先でも規制を上げる癖があるんだ。
Kinomi looked disapproving as Sojo nonchalantly shared this insight. It was the first he had ever heard of it.
怪しいな。またよからぬことでも企んでるんじゃないか、そこの。
ないよ。戻って掃除の続きをするぞ、飛び丸。
Sojo pat Tobimaru on the shoulder a couple times. It started walking. Tobimaru cast a doubtful glare in his direction as he meandered off. He had a feeling that Sojo was covering for Kinomi somehow.
まさか旧校舎に火なんてつけてないだろうな。
誰もしないよ、そんなことは。
Sojo kept walking and did not even look back at Tobimaru as he spoke. Tobimaru and Kinomi tilted their heads in confusion as they reluctantly followed the unusually aggressive Sojo back to their cleaning spot. Yeah, he is pretty aggressive today, I don't know why. And so, the special winter cleaning team's activities ended uneventfully. The time was 3 in the afternoon. Upon departing, Kinomi and his crew invited Sojo to come hang out with them. He declined politely due to his job that evening. He had about 2 hours until his shift began. Not quite enough time to do anything fun, but just enough time to fill it with something. Sojo thought about relaxing in a park somewhere, but quickly changed his mind after remembering how cold it was even in the city. Not to forget that Alko had handed him those pills in the morning. Alko was absolutely correct in her prediction. Heading back to the mansion would just be a waste of time. There was no reason for him to return to the mansion until after his shift at work. Still, Sojo found himself on the way back anyway. Having grown up deep in the mountains, a little 2-hour walk was really no sweat off his back. Misaki was one of the more quiet residential areas in Misaki City. The only thing that really stood out here was Shiro Inuzuka. Yeah, I remember I had trouble saying it the first time. I remember. Shiro Inuzuka. It was a hill that led directly into the woods. The silhouette of the mountain served as a backdrop to suburbia, silently overshadowing the small human actions of the people who lived here. Even in modern day of technological progress, the people here were always careful to pay reverence to the nature around them. How long have I been streaming? Not long, only 30 minutes. If that mansion were on a shrine, it would not be a haunted house but a famous tourist attraction. The house around Shiro and Inuzuka were all magnificent. The houses. Soujiro understood as he looked from the bottom of this hill where the rest of the town lived at the roof of the mansion tucked away in the woods. He understood what Tobimaru was talking about how the Koonchi family who owned the mansion might be the richest people in town. Soujiro began walking towards the mansion with such thoughts simmering in his mind. The feelings of the hard asphalt beneath his feet instead of soft dirt felt lonely and isolating. Man, I think he might be depressed, bro. I ain't gonna lie. He walked along the paved road for 10 minutes or so before reaching the iron fence of the wood. They're using that phrase a lot. I don't know why. Ooh, man. Beyond this fence was the private property of the Koonchi family. It was bereft of any awkward no trespassing signs. The tall, overbearing iron fence was more than enough to remind visitors that they're unwelcome here. Soujiro casually pushed on the iron gate. Only 2 days had passed since the end of the final exams, and he already seemed more than comfortable with the idea of entering this wood alone. The path to the mansion from inside the wood curved and bent like a snake. It took about 15 minutes to reach the mountain on this path. Mansion. He could have chosen to ignore the long incline and travel in a straight line through the wood, but he would have expended significantly more energy in doing so. No, using the wooded path was the sensible option, barring an emergency. Upon entering the foyer, Souyjuro heard a conversation coming from the drawing room. It was no doubt Alko and Alice. Souyjuro decided to join them. Ever since fall exams had ended, Alko and Alice had switched from their daily routine to a more irregular schedule. Alko would disappear into Alice's room in the west wing of the mansion for a while, where she would remain. Alice would go into Alko's room, not to be seen again. Or they would vanish into the corridors leading around the rear of the mansion, doing who knows what, where Souyjuro was most certainly not allowed to enter. Not that he was interested in what they were doing, since Alko and Alice did not seem to want to include him either, serving both parties nicely. For the time being, the Koonji estate was pretty peaceful.
Tadaima.
Souyjuro quietly opened the door to the drawing room. Even though they tried not to be involved in each other's business, Souyjuro made it a habit to greet them. The two girls sat across from him on the sofa. On the table in front of them was a large, extravagantly decorated mirror. Alko was dressed for comfort, wearing jeans instead of her usual skirt. In stark contrast, Alice was dressed in her usual all black. Even though the break from school was well underway, the witch still insisted on wearing black. Goodness, what's going on over there? As Alko had explained, it was probably because it was too much effort for Alice to wear anything else. Sojuro's thought was that he would like to see her wear something different. Alko and Alice seemed to be in the middle of some sort of dispute. The air in the drawing room was tense. They both ignored his greeting. Alice only briefly looked up at him.
じゃあ、東川の視点はあそこの柱は白色だし、そう簡単には奪われないでしょ。ええ。今のところ東川は侵食されていないけど、一つ隣の鈴穂の視点が消された以上、楽観はできないわ。残りの割り出しは今までより早くなる。そっか。一個釣れれば、あとは芋づる式だもんね。反省したわ。甘く見てたのはこっちの方だった。ここからは1週間単位の攻防になるわね。
The two continued their heated discussion from opposite sides of the table. Alko neglected to even glance up at Souyjuro. Souyjuro sensed that she wanted to concentrate on the discussion at hand.
でも消せないな。あの夜に人形を出してくるタイミングといい、隠し方だけは一級品なうちの視点を短期間で特定することといい、こいつまず間違いなく市内にアジトを敷いてるわよね。なのになんで結界に異常がないんだろう。三崎市一帯の索敵門はもう100年近く破られたことがないのに。
Alko bit her nails nervously, while Alice nodded along. It seemed as though she was wondering the same thing.
母もここの結界には触れなかった。三崎の結界をかいくぐるにはあなたのおじいさんかそれ以上の技量を持つ魔術師でないと難しいけど、それほどの魔術師なら逆に気配は隠しきれない。何か特殊な音響法かもしれないわね。ここ数年新しいサークルの話は聞かないけど。何？シャーウッドの森？メイキングなら以前アリスの霧が粉砕したじゃない。あれ以上の音響があるっていうの？例えばの話よ。今回の相手はこちら以上の技量を持っているか、こちらの知らない技術を持っているか。どちらにせよ評価を改めるべきね。私たち気づかないうちに追い詰められているのかも。
I'm talking about the man on the Lakers. That song is so funny, bro. The two fell silent. Souyjuro, after some internal deliberation, decided to break the silence.
やあ、ただいま。
That's so cute. Kofaya looked up at him in response to his hesitant declaration.
いいからお風呂に入ってきたら。汚れてるわよ、宗十郎。
And with that, Aka returned her gaze to the mirror. Alice briefly looked up at Souyjuro again before also returning her gaze to the mirror. Perhaps feeling at least somewhat satisfied that his greeting was acknowledged, Souyjuro left the drawing room and closed the door behind him. Oh, that's funny. Oh man. At least he was satisfied. Aka was right. His clothes were a little soiled.
そうだな。もったいないけど、確かに。
Souyjuro returned to his room, thinking that a bath might actually feel pretty nice in this cold weather, despite not really having broken a sweat at all during the day. He climbed the stairs from the foyer up the second flight into the attic. Unlike the other rooms in the mansion, this one had no frills to its decor. It was a little cumbersome to use as a living space, but comfortable enough for Souyjuro. Everywhere else in the mansion was a little too gaudy for his taste. As far as shelter and a place to sleep at, Souyjuro was more than satisfied with his accommodations. There was no electricity in the attic. The only light that which crept in from a small skylight. Was that. Not that Souyjuro minded. He was more accustomed to living without electricity than living with it. With only the faint winter light to guide him, he readied a change of clothes and a towel before heading down the foyer. Despite the magnificent size of the mansion, there was only one bath in the whole building. And not a particularly large one at that. Whoever the architect was, he or she must not have thought a bath to be so important, or perhaps they were not the bath type. Souyjuro descended to the foyer and made his way to the back of the stairs. He knocked on the door to the bath. As expected, there was no answer from the other side. The only other two occupants of the mansion were still talking in the drawing room. After confirming it was unoccupied, Souyjuro quietly entered the bathroom. Even though Souyjuro was not aware of it himself, as was common for him, the only hobby he had acquired since coming down from the mountain was taking a nice, relaxing bath. Souyjuro had left, but the two girls were still locked in their heated discussion. Needless to say, the topic of their conversation was still that of an outsider mage who had appeared in Misaki City last month. This was, after all, the problem that had occupied their time before this whole situation with Souyjuro arose. Dealing with and eliminating the interloper who had set his or her sights on their territory.
今まではおとりにばっかり食いついてたから甘く見てたけど、それも計算づくだったのかしらね。
Wow. Yo. Goodness. All this time would be oh, teasing, I'm bugging.
こっちが油断してる隙に本命を一つ奪われた。この相手との戦いはこれからが本番ってことか。
Situation was growing more dire by the day. Until only a couple of days ago, the enemy had limited themselves to small skirmishes, but now they had shifted to a full-on offensive. Aka had two major bounded fields she used for defense. One, the larger of the two, was placed around Misaki City to detect magical energy and magecraft. This was used to observe and monitor visitors from the outside the city. It was initially set up by Aozaki's ancestors, the administrators of this territory, and had no way to be removed. The other was set up to energize and manage ley lines from within the territory. The five sigils carved into the earth made up a standard square type array, protecting all that lay within its bounds. After some manipulation of the mana flow, the power within was directed to accumulate at the Kawanji estate. That is to say, the bounded field existed to monopolize the magical energy within Misaki City. There were 5 sigils in total, I keep saying sigils. There are 5 sigils in total, with the Koonji estate located in the center. If all 5 were forcibly removed, Alco's jurisdiction over this territory would be the entitled one. Without the power of the land to back them up, they would be forced to fight back against their invaders on equal ground, with only their own innate abilities to protect them. The only reason Alice and the inexperienced Alco were able to defend this territory so far is because of these 2 fields. The dragnet that notified Aozaki of any threats was also her lifeline. But this time, the enemy had somehow slipped through the cracks and was running rampant. This is what the girls had to face up to.
どちらにせよ時間の問題ね。視点が全て潰されたらいよいよここでの籠城になるけどいいの？青子。ん？別にいいんじゃないの？アリスの言う通り、残りの視点を消されるのは時間の問題なんだし。そりゃ敵のアジトを発見できれば同じだけど、それは絶対必要ってわけでもないでしょ。視点を消されても私にはあんまり関係ないし。何より館の守りはあんたがいる限り万全だしね。あっちの方からやってきてくれるならそれこそ飛んで火にいるよ。他に心配事なんてないでしょ。そうね。敵が一人だけならその時は鏡の範囲をここに集中させて戦場にすればいい。
Alice touched the mirror on the table with her pale fingers. The surface of the mirror rippled like water. The mirror was another protector of Misaki City, separate from Aosaki's bounded fields. Miraculously, it was a ploy that existed only to protect Alice Koonji rather than Misaki City itself. It generated a thick fog and acted as an invitation to any visitors, drawing them into its board game-like world. Alice referred to it only as the mirror, but it was known to her friends as the Mirror of Slumber. This is a magecraft that Alice Koonji wielded. Within the rippling surface of the mirror, an image of a castle began to form, and also a lush forest, a field, and a river. Hako stared at the mirror in silence, before suddenly jumping to her feet off the sofa.
そうと決まれば、あとは行動あるのみね。出かけるわよ、アリス。とにかく現場を見ないことには始まらない。
Alice let out a tired sigh in response to Ako's determination, then gave the mirror a gentle caress. The sound of dripping water filled the room. The mirror began to consume the table in a thick fog with a single caress from Alice.
順番に回るのなら、帰るのは朝になるわね。まあまあ、そう億劫がらないで。ところでアリス、火の五芒星の退去ってこうだっけ
Hako traced a shape in the air with her fingers. She mimed a star-shaped sign from the top, moving down and to the right, from there to the upper left, and so on. Hold on. Bop, bop. No. Bop, bop. Bop, bop. Bop, 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 bop. Yeah. Or am I... No, I think I know what she's talking about, but like... Ah, man. It's weird to visualize it, but I know... Yeah, no, I'm not bucking. I did it right. I had to try it. Alice sat up from the sofa, letting out a heavy sigh. They both took their coats from their hangers and left the drawing room. That's so mean.
失礼ね。私だって日々成長してるわよ。この間のおまじないだってちゃんと成功したんだから。おまじない？簡単な暗示の呪文。ほら、アリスが教えてくれた軽く弱く、うまく早く、チクタクチクタク、急げや急げってやつ。それ、本当？本当も本当。 後で総十郎に聞いてみなさい。
Alice swallowed her words, clearly displeased. She slightly stopped herself in time to realize it was not worth the effort to take issue with it.
けど留守中その彼はどうするの？大丈夫でしょう。アリスの西館と開かずの間に入らなきゃ即死するようなことは。
Alka responded hastily as she opened the door to the foyer. Soon as she did, just as quickly as Alice's doubts had gotten stuck in her throat, Alka suddenly froze, unable to speak. For a moment, Alka wasn't sure who was standing before her. She could only stare at the glinting rays of sunlight creeping into the room as she reeled from the shock. Her mind was completely blank. It was as if she had just woken up from a nap, or a jack-in-the-box had just opened in her face. Souyjuro was probably the only person who truly knew how long that dumbfounded silence went on.
あんたこんなところで何してるのよ一体。
Alka finally found her voice.
何って着替えてるんだけど。
Sojuro's response was a matter of fact. He offered no explanation as to why he was changing in the foyer and not in the bathroom. Alka was too shocked to read him. The riot act? The riot act? What? Hold on, let me look this up. I wish this game had an encyclopedia for stuff like that. Because, like, I don't know what that means. Ah, okay. Yeah, no, I wish I had an encyclopedia. That'd be so fire. Magic Johnson. Souyjuro was putting on a shirt after presumably just getting out from the shower, from the bath. His neck was wrapped in bandages and he was completely shirtless. His hair was wet, but his skin wasn't glistening from the steam of hot water. He must have washed himself with nothing more than cold. Oh, goodness. Though shocked as to why anyone would do such a thing in this cold weather, she let it slide. The source of her silent stupor was simply his body. Until now, she'd only seen him as harmless. Without his clothing to hide him, however, he was more fit than she'd ever imagined. For a rough mountain upbringing, where one's body and strength meant survival, perhaps he was even a bit underdeveloped. And on top of that,
それ傷跡なの？
Alko asked cautiously. Souyjuro followed her gaze. He had something that looked like a burn scar on his arm. It was random in appearance, nothing like Alko's mage crest with its patterns, ordered
こ
patterns.
れか。ずいぶん前に野犬の群れに襲われて噛みつかれたんだ。命があっただけでも幸運だから、傷跡ぐらいはご愛嬌だ。
A long time ago, he was he talking about when he was a child. Though his life was saved, it was apparent that he hadn't been able to receive proper treatment deep in the mountains where he lived. Those scars are proof of that. Considering it happened so many years ago, it was likely they would never fade. If only for an instant, Alko thought the wild scars left on his skin suited his lean body perfectly.
確かにあまり気持ちのいいものじゃないな。
Dang, hold on.
確かにあまり気持ちのいいものじゃないな。自分の部屋で着替えるべきだった。
Hot dog, burger, and taco. Souyjuro sounded slightly ashamed as he put on his shirt, looking at Alko, standing there in cold silence. The two girls had no response. Souyjuro headed for the stairs to go back to his room.
ちょっと待って宗十郎。
Souyjuro stopped and turned around.
なんていうか。
Alko looked away awkwardly, apparently not knowing why she had stopped him, herself.
なんか青崎らしくない。さっきから変だけど、熱でもあるんじゃないのか？あれから満足に寝てないだろう、二人とも。
He was of course referring to the final exams. From Soldier's perspective, the amount of work Alco put in seemed strange.
熱なんてないったら。そうじゃなくて、どうしてこんなところで着替えてたのよ、あんたは。
Of course, yeah, because this is the face that you make when you want to keep up appearances. Alco was doing her best to keep up appearances, but for some reason, Soldier was hesitant to say too much more.
それは言いづらいんだが、下着の管理はきちんとした方がいいと思う。
What? Alice, who had been completely silent behind Alco, couldn't resist responding to that statement. Although she hadn't wanted to get involved. This was something she couldn't ignore.
言っておくけど、それは青子だから。
Alice's response was quick and to the point.
洗濯の当番は確かに私だったけど。
Alco seemed like she was just holding back on going critical.
とにかく、もうすぐアルバイトだから着替えてくれ。
Sensing that those two were probably about to get into an argument, Sojo took his chance to leave. And with that, Sojo and Percy left the scene.
アリス、とりあえず片付けてくるわ。
Alice calmly walked into the bathroom. A few minutes later, just as the two were about to head out and fulfill their duties as mages, I could remember something she wanted to
そうだ、
ask.
アリス。傷ってあれのこと？あれは傷跡じゃないわ。だって、あんなにも誇らしいもの。
Hako agreed. What impressed her the most about those scars was how he treated them simply as part of his past, absent of any regret. Alco wouldn't have gone so far as to say he was proud, but it seemed her instincts had been correct. That and one more thing.
でも一つだけはっきりしたわ。それじゃあ、不覚にも見惚れてたのは私一人じゃなかったってことよね、アリス。
Alco smiled wryly at Alice, like a child who knew they were doing something they shouldn't with their friend. Alice was trying to ignore her as best as she could. She looked away without saying a word. Alco let out a satisfied snicker and began walking towards the front door.
じゃ、行こうか。まずはあの公園からでいいでしょ。今回の件はあそこから全てが始まったわけだし。
I can't believe this, man. Leave the poor boy alone. He's just cracked out of his mind. She was talking about the local park in Misaki. The place where they had run into the enemy puppets, and of course, where their involvement with Soujuro had all begun. Alright, give me 1 second, please.
man.
Alright, sorry. Oh, wait. It's funny. I think there's only 2 people in here because I'm both of them. Put him on the news. I'm evil like Lucy's son. It's funny, like, I don't think I'll be a streamer who uses face cam. At the very least, if I do, it'll be a rare occasion because it's not that I'm against showing my face. I've done it before in a video, but well, not just videos, but still. Like, having my face be shown in a stream just seems so weird to me. Never been a fan of the prospect, but I don't even have a face cam, so can't even worry about the problem that's not here. Anyway, so and to preface, I don't think if you use a face cam you're weird. I just applying that to myself is weird. Anyway, so early the next morning, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. Most people were still in their bed sleeping. Although some 24-hour convenience stores had opened last year, Masaki Town was still very much living in the good old days of the early 80s. Even a tofu shop in the shopping district, known for opening earlier than anyone else, didn't open until 6. But this is the late 80s, during the latter half of Japan's bubble economy. It was a tiny time when metropolitan areas ever slept. Those in the countryside, however, remained in the past. It was a time, I don't know why I said tiny. The homes were blanketed in silence. The streets were empty of the commuters, and not a single automobile could be heard. The sun was just barely peeking over the horizon. The town would still be asleep for at least an hour longer before it began waking up. It was during this time that someone stepped onto the Koonji estate. Souyjuro was working the late shift during winter vacation and had just come home. He worked from 5 to 5, 12 hours. He moved quietly. No, not even 12 hours. 12 hours. Yeah, because, bro, Souyjuro, you're insane. He moved quietly through the drawing room so he wouldn't wake up Alko and Alice, who were presumably still asleep. The Koonji estate had few established rules. One of those rules forbade more Japanese tea. This new rule had only come into effect 3 days prior. It was proposed after Alice saw Souyjuro drinking green tea in the kitchen after dinner one night. Oh? That's so cute. Looking back on it, the decision had been made rather abruptly. That single gasp of surprise was all Alice said. She grasped her head as if she was battling with the most vicious of migraines, called for Alko, and then made the decision to ban all Japanese teas from this mansion. By some miracle, Alko managed to negotiate and keep Sojuro's privileges to barley tea during the summer.
だいたいイギリス産だって初めはグリーンティーが主流だったじゃない。
Alko had clearly hit a nerve with this argument. Alko stared at Alice, fairly certain why she was so taken aback by Sojuro's actions.
そこまで嫌がらなくてもな。お茶は何だって美味しいのに。
Yeah, no, I don't get it either. Soujuro grumbled to himself while sipping his hot green tea. He didn't realize that Alice was upset because he had poured his green tea into a teacup meant for... I see. In Sojuro's defense, this is the only teacup that Alice had given him permission to use. At any rate, the early morning was his to enjoy. This was his moment to relax with the Japanese tea set he smuggled in. He didn't use his time to read books or watch tea. He just drank his tea and gazed fondly at the garden or rather, the dense woods outside. Souyjuro simply sat, relaxed, and let his mind wander. About an hour passed. Just as he was beginning to feel refreshed, he heard sounds coming from the foyer. Numbing up. He knew it was Akko and Alice talking, so he rushed to hide his. Teacup, teapot, and tea leaves in the kitchen. Hiding the contraband was easy enough considering just how many unused shelves there were in the kitchen. Souyjuro was perturbed by how they wasted the potential of such a splendid kitchen. Oh man. Alko spoke as she took off her white down. I would say white dawn. I don't know if this is intentional. I can't tell. Next to her, Alice silently took off her black jacket to do black coat. Hold on. Souyjuro stuck his head out from the kitchen and gestured that he was about to put on some water to boil. Alice tilted her head slightly at him. It wasn't that she thought his gesturing was funny or anything like that. Alice glanced up at the clock in the drawing room, and her expression darkened. Alko asked this from her comfortable seat on the sofa. Oh. Alice responded indifferently before finally sitting down as well. Alko yelled her matter-of-course request into the kitchen. Souyjuro didn't respond, but it was an affirmative silence. This is the result of 2 entire nights worth of cramming that Alice knew nothing about. Milk? Tea with milk? Milk tea? Wait, I've heard of that before. Milk tea, that's real. That's a real thing, milk tea. Yeah, milk tea is real. Dang, that one's far. There are some here that like, what's it called? Like places where I live that serve milk tea. Huh. Shoot, I should try some. I should try some. Milk tea. Hey, why not? I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Alice responded out of obligation. Tea with milk. Got it. For some reason, Souyjuro dutifully answered Alice's request. She's so petty. She's so petty. Oh my gosh, she's so petty. She's so petty. Golly, the fact that she noticed that, that's insane. Anyway, oh, excuse me, she talked. It seems she had allowed herself to accept another's kindness, at least for today. The two were conversing over a distance of 4 yards. Alice decided to add her opinion to the conversation. Her quiet tone was luckily just low enough that Souyjuro couldn't hear her from the kitchen. Akko became gradually more irritated as she failed to grasp what had been odd about the conversation. Just then, Souyjuro appeared holding a tray with a teacup for each of them.
何を話してるんだ。単に新しいアルバイトを始めただけだろ。
He put the cups down on the black table without making even the slightest. That's crazy. Alice could have complained about how proper his job as a waiter had made him. Well, she didn't say anything out loud. She did nod in his direction to show some gratitude. I'll go, however.
天城浜だっけ。あそこってスタジアムがあるところでしょ。ツアーの会場になるから時々行くけど。
The student council president, a supposed model student, loved rock bands. Alka was secretly obsessed with a number of bands and used to travel out of town just to see them perform live when she was in middle school. Of course, this was a world that Souyjuro was far from familiar with.
それよりまた新しいバイト始めたんだ。そんなに働いてどうする気なのよ、宗十郎は。
I want money.
ああ、よく聞いてくれたね。
That's toxic. Oh man, this dude Souyjuro is so toxic. Oh, you were listening.
本人の名誉のために名前は伏せるけど、誰かさんと誰かさんが俺の少ない収入を無慈悲に奪っていくから働く先を増やしたんだ。
Oh man, this is as much resistance as Souyjuro was able to give. Aoko lifted her teacup to her mouth as if she was completely oblivious to Sojuro's monologue.
それは大変。
Alice said this as she set her teacup down quietly. There was something she just did not understand. Ako had to hold back her laughter as she looked at Soujuro and Alice.
言った自分が未熟だった。
Sojuro's shoulders fell as he said this. He took a sip of his black tea, still unsure about the taste.
まあ、アルバイトが多いって分かってくれるだけでいいか。そういったわけだから、冬休み中は夜も留守にする。例の薬はアルバイト先で飲むしかないんだけど。
ああ、それなら心配いらないわ。もうあれはやめたから。いちいち作るのも面倒だし、もっとしずきくんに似合うのを見つけてきな。
No, don't do it. Oh my gosh. Hako had a huge, ominous grin on her face. She put her hand into her jacket pocket and pulled out a little paper bag. It was a small, circular object about 20 inches in diameter, wrapped up nicely like a present.
はい、これは入居祝い。これからはそれをつけておくのよ、宗十郎。
Soujuro opened the paper bag. Inside was a white belt, but it wasn't a belt for putting around your waist to keep your pants up. To put it as clearly as possible, it was a collar, or some people would call it a choker.
青子。
My words exactly. Alice's expression darkened at this turn of events. But it wasn't clear whether it was her friend's insidiousness or sympathy for Soujuro that concerned her. I'm with Alice. I'm with Alice on this one.
どう？気に入った？
Hako was Hako was clearly a little crazy. She is. At least she wasn't totally serious. It was obvious that it was at least half a prank to just see how Soujuro would react. But Soujuro was solemnly considering the collar he had just been gifted.
意味はつかみかねるけど、こういうものを人からもらうのはこれが初めてだ。
That's so sweet. He actually sounded like this would be a happy memory for him. Alice narrowed her eyes at what was transpiring.
けど、これは何に使うんだ？
簡単よ。金庫寺と同じで、飼い犬が主人に逆らうと首を絞めるの。あっちは頭につけてたけど、それよりは首のがマシでしょ？
Soujuro grimaced when he finally understood Aoko's mean-spirited gift. He really wanted to ask her what kind of person comes up with such an evil idea.
つまり、秘密をばらしたり逆らったりしたら首が締まると。やっぱり熱でもあるんじゃないのか、青崎は。
あら、首輪は嫌？せっかく宗十郎に似合いそうなものを見つけたのに。
Hako still had an evil grin on her face. But Soujuro had a surprising response to this gift that Aoko clearly gone as a prank.
それもそうか。毎日毒を飲むよりはマシだし、このベルト自体いいものだし。 気に入った。ありがとう、青崎。
Big ups to Souyjuro because he's a better man than I am. Golly. He spoke 100% truthfully. Alko's face contorted in disbelief, and she could only mumble if he was serious.
人の行為はどんなものだって嬉しいよ。それに、それが青崎ならなおさらだ。
And with that, Souyjuro put the belt around his neck. He placed it over the bandages already there.
こんな感じかな。きついけど、そのうち慣れるだろう。
That's gonna be such a pain when you're eating, though. Despite his words to the contrary, Souyjuro tugged at the belt uncomfortably and adjusted it. It was such a perverse scene that even Alko's face was red as a beet, even though this had all been her idea. I don't like this. If I'm being frank, I don't like this. Not because like it's a bad scene. I just don't like it's a prank, right? It's meant to be a joke, and I understand that. But it's like, come on, man, like ease up on him, please. This is a little too much. Like, this is the same girl that helped him study and really took care of him. You know, going to school, making sure that his grades were good. Like, come on, man, like this prank feels a little mean-spirited. I'm just that's my perspective on it. I might just be a softie. But I feel bad for Souyjuro. I'm with Alice here. I'm with Alice. Like, come on, like this is a little too much. Perhaps it was because it gave her such a clear reminder of the scar she had seen the day prior.
よし。止め方はこれでいいのか。
Alka retreated guilty. Oh, excuse me. Alka retreated guiltily as Souyjuro came closer for her to check the fit of his new collar. This is what you get. This is what you get.
いいよ。アリスに聞くから。
Souyjuro shifted his gaze from Alko to Alice. Alice stared intently at Souyjuro wearing his new collar and said,
ロックね。青子、趣味に走りすぎよ。
That's mean. She could not have put it any more bluntly.
いや、やかましい。そんなんじゃない。
Oh
もうい
man.
い。とにかくそういうことよ。これからはその首輪が薬の代わりよ。せいぜい秘密を守ることね。
She's flustered. Alko was oddly empathetic as she spoke before stopping off toward the... I guess. Alko was oddly empathetic as she spoke before stomping off toward the hallway.
それと、これからお昼まで仮眠を取るけど、くだらないことで殺すから。
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's a murder. Alko slammed the door behind her as she left the drawing room. Souyjuro stared in amazement.
なんで青崎はいつもいきなり怒るんだろう。
He murmured to himself, forgetting that Alice was standing right there in front of him.
しずきくんには悪意が通じないからでしょう。気にする必要はないわ。
悪意って今のが？
Alice looked up at Sojuro's innocent response. There was a glimmer in her eyes that showed surprise at her current actions.
なんでもないから気にしないで。
With that terse reply, she returned to her usual expressionless self. There was no use explaining Alko's feelings. Alko bought that collar for the sole purpose of annoying Soujuro and causing mischief. When things don't turn out how she planned, her conscience got the better of her. Good. Good. Soujuro mistakenly thought that Alko was angry at him. Excuse me. I should mention earlier. Again, I don't like that scene. Not because it's a bad scene. It's just I think it's really mean. But luckily she got her comeuppance and her conscience got the better of her. Alice didn't bother telling Soujuro all those heartwarming details though. Not because it was too much work, just because she was never one to have meaningless conversation. That was how she had been raised.
しずきくんはこれからどうするの？
Alice suddenly changed the topic. Soujuro thought for a while before replying.
夕方までゆっくりするよ。ここのところ忙しすぎた。せっかくだからテレビも見ていたいし、お昼には青崎を起こさないといけないだろう。
そうなら静かにしていて。
Alice let out a gentle sigh and rose to her feet. Just keep it quiet. Soujuro would understand exactly what she meant by those words in just a few minutes. The sun shining through the window was bright. It was just about 9 o'clock, about time for the morning television programs to get going. Bro did not sleep? Like, what is going on? Alright, an hour and 30. I think I got 3 hours in me. Maybe 2.5. Soujuro was sitting on the sofa, staring out the window at the scene outside. The view from the neighboring sunroom showed a courtyard in a state of disrepair. Soujuro could appreciate the outdoors in both its natural, wild state and when tamed by human hands. Soujuro muttered to himself, turning another page in his textbook. On the table before him was a mathematics textbook and a notebook with Aoko's name on it. Although at first glance he appeared to be a diligent student studying on his day off, he was in truth only doing so as a compromise. He had given up on his main intent of watching the morning television shows. The reason why he gave up was simple. He was being considerate of Alice, who sat in front of him with her nose buried in a book. Instead of holding herself up in her room, she brought out her old, dusty books to read. This is what she meant when she had said to keep quiet. So she found it difficult to turn on the TV. With that decided, Soujuro resigned himself to reviewing some of the practice problems he had gotten wrong. In a drawing room for some reason. There wasn't any particular purpose in doing it there, but he also had no real reason to study back up in his room. And so there he was, leisurely highlighting his textbook with Alice there in the same room. For Soujuro, there really was no difference between his room in the attic and a drawing room with Alice. To be fair, he could probably live with a tiger as long as it didn't cause any trouble. That was both Soujuro's biggest strength and his biggest weakness. Before he knew it, the clock was showing 11. He spent 2 hours doing his math problems but wasn't even halfway finished. More than that, he was disappointed in himself for lacking the courage to speak up at all. He dropped his mechanical pencil onto the notebook and watched it roll away. He knew that Aoko and Alice were busy with something since final exams had ended. He also knew that she had hardly gotten any sleep recently. If she had been able to ignore him during exams, she probably would have had an easier time. Today's nap was probably the first proper sleep Aoko had gotten in days. Though she showed no signs of exhaustion despite the fact that she must have hit peak long ago. She always seemed raring to go. It wasn't that she was trying to act tough. That was just the kind of person she was. Always positive, always tough as nails. And that was exactly why she came off as completely irrational at times. But if that was the case, you could probably describe Alice in exactly the same way. Soujuro couldn't help but feel a bit inadequate when he saw their single-minded focus on their goals. He had been so preoccupied with adjusting to his new life that he'd neglected to think about what he was going to do with himself after. Thinking about this cast a gloomy cloud over his heart. He felt like he'd never find a clear purpose in life like Aoko and Alice seemed to have. At least not since he'd left the mountains. His old life was gone now, never to return. He was like a kite cut from its string, destined to fly only where the winds took it. And without anything to ground him, he couldn't do anything about the empty future that lay ahead. He could only let himself fly where the currents took him, slowly losing the sight of the ground below.
そうだな。便利なものは溢れているけど、本当に望むものは。
The town was full of options, but he could find nothing. He'd ask himself the same questions time and time again. It never made him feel any better. If anything, it only made him feel worse and worse. Yeah, I had a feeling he was depressed, I'm not gonna lie. That, or maybe he felt that lamenting his own ineptitude would lead to finding some kind of goal or desire someday. Tired of his own sniveling, Souyjuro dejectedly closed his book. When he looked up, he saw his own face reflected back at him in a TV screen. His new collar was there around his neck, looking as out of place as ever. Perhaps a fool like him who felt weak when faced with other strengths did need to wear a collar after all.
楽だ。悩むのは一丁前になってから。
He shook off his thoughts of doom and gloom and sat up straight. After psyching himself up a little, he stood up from the sofa.
よし。何か作るけど、アリスは？
Souyjuro asked casually. But Souyjuro had been doing his own thing. He remained mindful of Alice. Alice looked up, surprised at hearing her name. She had completely forgotten Souyjuro was even there.
私
Yes?
ああ。アリス、朝から紅茶しか飲んでないだろ。どうせ作るなら、いっぱい作った方がお得なんだ。
Without waiting for her reply, Souyjuro headed off to the kitchen while putting on his apron. Alice tried to wave at him to stop, but by then he'd already disappeared into the kitchen. That's so cute. She was hesitant to walk all the way in there just to tell him she didn't need anything. And besides, she was actually hungry. That's so cute. Souyjuro's proposal made sense, and her empty stomach agreed. Alice was hungry, and Souyjuro was going to make lunch. Making lunch for both of them would save the time and trouble of cooking two separate meals. There was no logical reason for Alice to refuse this gesture. She decided to stay quiet and tactfully accept his offer. Look at her, man. That's adorable. Oh, man. She whispered the words softly, not for anyone in particular to hear but herself. The truth was, however, Alice had been in a bad mood all morning. After checking all the sigils around Misaki City and boarding the first train back from Tokawa, all she wanted to do was spend the rest of her day reading until the words turned into jumble. Her iron resolve to complete this task would not be interrupted by someone else milling about in the drawing room. This was her mansion, and there was no way she was going to lock herself up in her room on account of Souyjuro. However, with that said, she knew it would be wrong to kick Souyjuro out for no real reason. As it stood, Souyjuro had actually kept quiet like she asked. He wasn't in the wrong here. If Alice had really wanted to be alone, she should have gone to her room.
静かにしてじゃなくて一人にさせてと言うべきだった
Alice is so weird, bro. Alice had defiantly stayed in the drawing room despite realizing the dilemma she had put herself in. She had figured Souyjuro would eventually make a ruckus and run off to hide in his attic room. Her assumption could not have been more wrong. Souyjuro never left the drawing room. Moreover, she had actually stopped caring that he was there. Though he hadn't paid her any attention, he hadn't ignored her either. They had simply sat in silence together without any awkwardness. Alice felt the freedom of being alone, along with the comfort of someone being by her side. To put it into words, Souyjuro was just that kind of person. Shout out Quentin Post. That was probably the only reason Alice had been able to sleep so soundly with him there next to her. Souyjuro continued cooking in the kitchen, oblivious to the thoughts that went through Alice's head. She couldn't see him from the drawing room, but she could easily imagine him cooking in the kitchen.
変な人ね。どう？
Alice resumed reading after unwittingly stating her feelings out loud a second time. The sunlight beaming into the drawing room showed that it was noon. The sunlight actually looked warm, despite it being a cloudy winter day. Just as noon struck, Souyjuro returned to the drawing room with 2 sets of plates. Some food of an indescribable color was piled on the large cream-colored plates.
これは
What did he make? She hadn't expected much, and so she also hadn't requested anything. She could just refuse if it was something she didn't want. But this food left her at a loss despite psyching herself up.
これは何？
Alice spoke as though she was terrified of what had been placed before her.
何って焼きうどんに何かかけてみた。
Ah, good lord, Souyjuro, what did you make? If Alko had been there, she probably would have punched him. But Souyjuro just confidently placed the 2 large plates on the table. Steam billowed from the mountain of food like an angry volcano ready to erupt at any moment. The thick mystery sauce flowed over the plates as magma might from said eruption. And below it all were a seemingly infinite amount of slimy tentacle-like noodles. There's really nothing more to say about it. This is clearly the food of a poor, struggling student who favored quantity over quality. All that was required was a basic recipe, the will to cook something, and what few ingredients were needed. The pile of stir-fried noodles with sauce slattered on top was so horrifically bad, it was almost an art form. I don't know what it is with a lot of anime or like JRPGs that I've seen, that like someone in a group or in the show is just horrifically bad at cooking. Like extremely bad at cooking. This is a batch's cooking, if she had ever seen it. There was really nothing else you could call it. She had wondered what he was doing for an hour in there, and it turned out he'd been making this sauce. No sauce would have been fine, but Souyjuro had wholeheartedly gone the extra mile. It's oozing off of the plate, man. Oh, this making a mess. Souyjuro bowed his head slightly and picked up his chopsticks. He had brought a fork for Alice. The fact that it's shaking. She picked up the fork and stuck it into the noodles, half drowning in sauce. Souyjuro began eating, not seeming to care that Alice sat there looking like she was about to eat poison. Seeming to view this as a challenge, Alice furrowed her brow and slowly brought the mass of noodles to her mouth. She's so prideful. It was a little salty and ugly to look at, but it didn't taste bad at all. If anything, it was actually pretty good.
一つ聞きたいんだけど。
Souyjuro put down his chopsticks and turned to speak to
実際の
Alice.
話、魔術師の話はともかくとして、青崎はまだ誰にも手を出してないんじゃないか。
Give me a second to check something. Hold on. Okay, no, I know it's Alice's theme. Okay. Alice looked up quietly at the sudden question. She had been inspecting Sojuro's meal, but now she looked straight at him.
おかしなことを聞くのね、しずきくんが。
アリスには悪いけど、これは青崎本人には聞きようのないことだから、言いたくなければ答えないでくれ。
Alice didn't respond. Souyjuro resumed eating, not seeming disappointed. Alice stared blankly at him slurping his noodles. After much hesitation, she replied,
しずきくんの言う通り、青子はまだ人を殺したことはないわ。その行為自体は何回かこなしてはいるけれど。
Alice's response was slow and measured. Souyjuro still looked troubled, but not at the conversation they were having. Rather, he looked apologetic towards Alice. He said she didn't have to answer if she didn't want to, but Alice kept talking despite the face he was making.
しずきくんが見た公園での出来事が青子にとって初めての殺人行為よ。
Souyjuro silently nodded. Alice narrowed her eyes at him suspiciously.
まるで初めから分かっていたそぶりね。
そうじゃん。いや、そうなのかな。たまにその手のセリフを言うけど、何か違う気がしたんだ。だから多分、青崎はまだ人殺しというのを体験していないんじゃないかって。でもまあ、そんなことよりもっと確かなのは、
しずきくんが今生きているということね。
Souyjuro chuckled at Alice's stellar response. Exactly. Things would have been more clear-cut that night if Alco had actually killed someone. Excuse me. If Alco had actually killed someone before. Souyjuro would have been dead before he ever even saw her. Oh, that's funny. I think you can see my mouse. No, I hit it. Okay, yeah, you can't see my mouse. Souyjuro would have been dead before he ever even saw her face. For better or for worse, Akko remained inexperienced in spite of her ruthlessness and decisiveness. Souyjuro relaxed his shoulders. His stern face gradually returned to its normal carefree state. Then,
でもそんなことは関係ないわ。あの子はそのあたりが異常だから。行為は理性に、経験は知識でたやすく補ってしまう。そうね。青子はその気になれば迷うことなく人の命に手を出せる。
and with that, Alice went back to twirling noodles around her fork. She looks like she's having fun, Souyjuro thought as he ruminated over what she just said. She was rational enough to accept herself despite acting against society's morals, and possessed an intellect that exceeded even the confidence gained through experience. Had Alco been raised to utilize her logic and reason to forge reality from fiction? If that was the case, then perhaps they were different from Souyjuro, or they really were different.
こんなことを聞いたのは、青崎には内緒にしておいてくれないか。
Souyjuro seemed serious, as if he really regretted asking. Alice's expression remained unchanged, but she had never intended on saying anything to Alco anyway.
ありがとう。なんだかアリスには内緒話ばかり溜まっていくね。
Give me 1 second, please. The brain rot, bro. The brain rot's really real. I love Alice's theme so much, man. It's so good. Souyjuro went back to eating his food. Though Alice had only had a single bite. He was already scraping his he was already escaping his clean.
そういえば青崎にも聞いたんだけど、アリスと青崎はいつもああなのか。
Souyjuro had suddenly decided to change the topic of the conversation. His new topic was rather cold and dry relationship between Alco and Alice. Alco said the relationship was normal, but maybe Alice had a different opinion.
会話が少ないことを言っているのならそうなるわ。けど別に不便じゃないから。
Alice was still twirling noodles with her fork as she gave her concise answer. Around and around the noodles went, but none made it into her mouth.
不便じゃないって、そういうの仲がいいって言わないんじゃないのか。
私と青子の仲が良くないとしずきくんは困るの。
Souyjuro swallowed his words at Alice's perplexed reply. It would actually, but he wasn't sure how to respond when asked so directly.
いや、なんかこっちの考え方が悪かったみたいだ。もうその話題には触れないことにしたから忘れてくれ。それより、アリス。
Souyjuro gave Alice a piercing stare that was more intense than any time they talked before. Alice was taken slightly aback at the unusual intense look in his eyes. Her face became slightly flushed out of nervousness. That's her flush face? It's so hard to tell, I can't see the red. No, I think it's just a normal face, there's no red on it yet. Nobody besides Alco had ever stared at her like this before. Whether or not he noticed, Souyjuro waited a few moments before speaking slowly and with complete conviction.
それ、食べないなら欲しいんだけど。
An awkward silence followed.
悪いけどこれ私のだから。
Suzuki had cooked it, sure, but Alice wasn't wrong. He made it for her after all. There was a slight tinge of anger in her voice, but even she wasn't sure why it was there.
そうだね。少し意地汚かった。
Souyjuro, why? This whole conversation is filled with, sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. Souyjuro plopped himself down on the sofa. This must have looked particularly pathetic to Alice, so she responded with,
その材料はもう残ってないの。
She quickly covered her mouth. Apparently, she had surprised even herself. It was quite unusual for her to ask something like that.
残ってないよ。青崎の分も作っちゃったから。
Souyjuro stared a bit regretfully at Alice's plate as he responded. Alice could have just let it go, but for some reason she felt the need to speak up again.
青子の眠っている。
いや、もうすぐ起こすから。
Oh
こうし
man.
た後で作らされるより一緒に作っておいた方が楽だね。
Oh man.
と、もうすぐ1時か。ちょうどいい。
Oh my gosh.
青子は起こしたら殺すって言ってたけど。
Hoy. Alice wasn't sure why Souyjuro was willing to take such a risk. Souyjuro agreed, but started walking away anyway.
でもさ、今起こしておかないと、やっぱり後で殺される運命になると思うんだ。
I'd rather die now than later. His words were surprisingly affectionate. Leaving Alice with only that, Souyjuro headed to Alco's room. Alice watched him leave in silence before taking another bite of the stir-fried noodles. Glancing at the door to the hallway to make sure nobody was coming, she took another bite. She repeated that process many times before finishing her food. It was then that she heard Alco's wrath coming from the... Oh my gosh! Alice stood up and began solemnly clearing the table, feeling a bit sorry for what Souyjuro was dealing with. She knew she didn't really have to, but she felt like it was the least she could do for him. She never really expected to feel this way. But he cooked for her, And it was surprisingly good. Almost enough to make her forget how bad he was at making tea. Oh. Oh, wow, that was really short. That was really, really short. Wow, okay. Alright. I guess chapter 9. I'm gonna go to the archives. I know something was added. But that was really, really short. Genuinely, I was not expecting that. But I guess these two are gonna make up for that in terms of like the length. But we'll see. Hoshimo, moshimosh. Nah, bro. Moshimosh. Who's that coming out the pick and roll? Oh my gosh, ain't no way. Yeah, yeah. Talking about. Only Ako was present in the second student council room while Kojika Kumari entered. Ako was seated at a long table, surrounded by a pile of textbooks and using her pen to write rapidly. Strewn about the table were not school-specific notebooks, but rather papers for writing reports. I like Kumari a lot. I like her a lot.
知り合いの大学生から流してもらった代筆のバイト。何年も前に提出されたレポートを丸写しにして卒論クリアしようって話。写本ならぬ写レポートかよ。結構な量だなおい。それどこの大学生？まさかみぞら大じゃないでしょうね。
Kumari couldn't seem to hide her discomfort as she started thumbing through some of the reports next to Alko. The salty brown tinged reports had to be at least 10 years old.
そのまさかよ。知り合いの大学生なんてみぞら以外にいるかっていうの。安心なさい。熊の兄貴たちからの仕事じゃないから。そもそもあんたの兄貴軍団、今年も残る気満々なんでしょ？熊言わないで軍団もやめろ。
That's funny. I didn't realize that Kuma was in, like, well, of course, like Kumari, Kuma is in it, but like, I didn't know that was her nickname. That's cute. Her voice is snappy. Not that Aqua could judge, but this girl's unfriendliness could rival even her at her own at times, which that is true. We have seen it. Kumari's speech was dry enough as it was, but when she got riled up about something, she really let it all out. Apparently, she got it from her father. She was trying to work on it, but it was hard to fix an old habit she had since elementary school.
けどこれどうなの？丸写しにしても古すぎて通らないんじゃない？そこはそれ腐ってもタイというか。技術的に古い部分はピックアップしてあるからテキスト参考にして数字だけ変えておいてだってさ。何それ本当にバカじゃないの。そこまで分かってるなら自分でやればいいのに。今日の朝から半日の稼ぎにしちゃ悪くないわよ。レポート1冊分で1万円。生徒会長が内職かよ。道理で築地に監督を任せたわけだ。はい、他言は無用でお願いします。
Kumari relaxed a bit at Alko's pleasant response and decided to sit down in the nearest chair. The room was silent save for the sound of the scratching of Alko's ballpoint pen. The sky was clear blue, and there were boys in the rear courtyard playing baseball in their jerseys. With the special winter cleaning finished, it seemed they decided to start enjoying their free time.
寒いのによくもまあ。ってあれ2年の男どもだ。
Said boys were playing in teams of 5 since they apparently could not get enough people together to play a proper game. It was a boring game with mostly strikeouts and poor hits, but they sure seem to be having fun. Their yelling and hollering mostly consisted of bad words, surprise yells, and cackling laughter. It's funny. So, when I was younger, I was doing this last summer. Besides, I'm not even an old head either, but so, golly, I forgot how some characters in this game look. Goodness. Yeah. Anyway, so, well, actually, no. I guess yeah. When I was younger, when I was like probably like 16 to 18, I used to play just pick up games of basketball with some of my friends and whoever would be at the court. And I still do that. It's just more like back then we used to do it way more frequently because people were just busy, right? And that, like, the way that they just described the baseball game is exactly how it'd be for us, where sure, not all of us were the greatest. Some people were definitely better than most. And like for me, if I had to describe myself, I wasn't good. I was just fast. So if I could get past my defender and I didn't smoke the layup, I could make a layup. I was just a terrible shooter. I got better at it, but I still need to work on it 100%. But back then it was just so much fun just playing with my friends, you know? Like genuinely, a lot of people don't like sports. That's fine. Whether you play it or whether you watch it, you know? But it's just like anything else, any other form of entertainment, you know? Just having fun with your boys. Or whatever, Jenny, you know? Woman, non-binary, whoever's there. For me, it was just guys.
としずきが一緒なのはわかるけど、築地も一緒じゃん。青崎、あいつら仲いいの？はあ？なんでよそのクラスの集まりに顔出してんのよ、あいつ。まあ、裏山の清掃が終わってるのも文句はないけど。
Kenobi, Shizuki, and Tsukiji.
お、投げた。築地、ピッチャーできるんだ。基本あいつは何でもできるからね。本人サボり症でめったに動かないけど、本気出せば何だってこなすのよ。唯一足りない才能があるとしたら、子供らしさってやつでしょうね。
That's interesting.
詳しいじゃん。青崎、築地と付き合ってるって本当？あいつと付き合うぐらいならあんたと付き合うわ。
That's mean.
顔のいい男は好きじゃないし、やっぱり男はシュワちゃんぐらいじゃないと。
Austrian? What?
シュワ、誰それ？グレートの方のコナンの主役やった人。
Oh, Arnold.
へえ、顎割れてないとダメなんだ。青崎って面食いかと思ってたけど、ごっつい系が趣味なの？別にそういうわけじゃないけど。教訓よ、教訓。なよっとしたやつとか、やけに口がうまいやつとか、気軽な男はほんと信用ならないっていうか。
They continued their conversation, one staring at the report pages and the other gazing out at the schoolyard. They had met in high school and soon grew to be friends who enjoyed chatting together.
青崎、冬休みはどうする？予定ある？一回ぐらいは遊びに行きたいんだけど、超忙しくて。年明けに時間作るからそれまで待って。あ、B 組の山瀬さんたち誘う？確か去年も冬休みに上京してたでしょ、彼女ら。ああ、ありゃ私たちと系統が違う生粋のお嬢様だからね。青崎の趣味知ったらドン引きされるからやめといた方がいい。お、撃たれた。おお、柵越えた。あれってホームランってやつだ。やるじゃん、しずき。築地から一本取るなんて運動神経抜群ね。そりゃ山育ちだし、それぐらい取り柄がないと。来年の身体測定、飛び丸とトップ争うんじゃない？山じゃ2時間歩きっぱなしとかザラだったそうだし、水泳部じゃなく陸上部に紹介すればよかった。詳しいのね。もしかして付き合ってるのあっちとか？いや、さすがにないか。
The constant sound of Alka's ballpoint pen across paper suddenly stopped. She stood up naturally from her seat, took a quick break to pour some fresh tea. Okay. And returned to her work without acknowledging what had been said.
冬休みの予定だけど、くまり、 何かリクエストある？別に見たい映画が溜まってるだけ。こっちじゃ上映しない映画をはしごしたい。青崎は？私は新しい冬物と CD 買えればいいかな。あ、その前にまずは CD プレイヤーか。そろそろ3万円切るはずなのよあれ。はあ、新しいもの好きよねあんた。CD なんて高いだけで騒がれてるのが今だけだ
Kumar, I am so sorry, but you were 100% wrong. 100% wrong.
大体音楽なんてレンタルしてカセットテープに落とせば500円で済むじゃない。ベータデッキみたいにそのうち廃れるって。
I mean, she's not wrong. No, not pirating. What she's doing is a step above pirating because you still have to pay money to rent something. But it's not really above anything.
そう？私 CD は定番になると思うけどな。過去になるのはカセットテープの方よ、きっと。
Akko was right. Akko was 100% right.
それはない。絶対ない。かけてもいい。だって CD って録音できないんでしょ。そんなのにカセットテープが負けるはずない。
Little did she know.
今は保守派だからな。政権交代は何にだってあるでしょうに。でもまあその賭け乗った。生徒会の歴史に書いておくからね。10年いえ5年後を楽しみにしていましょう。
She was
5
right.
年後か。いいね。ちょうど大学の終わりだ。青崎、東京の大学に行くんでしょ。どこ志望してるのか教えてよ。実はまだ決めてないのよ。上京したいのは山々なんだけど。ありゃ意外。あんたのことだから向こう3年分ぐらいスケジュール組んでると思ったのに。
Akko laughed dryly at the obvious jab. Akko knew what direction she wanted her life to go in, but she didn't usually think too much about the details. Once she made a decision, she followed through with it. That was why she didn't actually write out a schedule.
クマ、終わったら駅前のラーメン屋付き合ってよ。体力使ったからなんかお腹減ってきた。そこは頭使ったから甘いもの食べたくなったにしといた方が女らしいと思うけどね。いいよ、うちでいいならサービスしとくけど寄ってく？もちろん。持つべきものは女の友情。
The girls waited patiently for winter vacation to start in the student council room. Their free time after school was spent through this kind of frivolous conversation. Akko spent her nights as a mage and her days as a normal high school student. The conversations she had with her friends were no different from many other girls her age. She enjoyed both aspects of her life equally, even if one of those involved fighting against mortal enemies.
ところで青崎、さっきの掛け金はどうする？そうね、私も鬼じゃないし、その時の貯金1割で手を打つわ。根こそぎ奪うのは勘弁してあげる。
She wasn't lying. Fundamentally, she was still an imp at heart. Yes. 100% true.
なんか
Souyjuro. Post Victim A. Victim A whispered quietly after. I love Oreo flurries, bro. I love Oreo milkshakes, man. So
よ
much.
し、じゃあこんなとこで野球やっててもしょうがねえし、街に繰り出すとしましょうか。
This is their fourth game of the 5-man base. Oh my goodness. They gained some spectators since starting an hour ago. Or were playing special rules where infield grounders were called out when caught, and home runs were rewarded with their leftover sweet red bean soup cans. Housegate Kanomi had gotten bored once he realized it was still going to be a while until it was his turn to play.
お前ほんと猿だったんだな。先立つものがねえから野球やろうぜって言い出したのはてめえだろう
それはそれ、これはこれっしょ。だって A 組のやつらとか集まってきたしさ、俺あいつら嫌いだしさ、なんかノリが合わないっていうか。
な。安心しろ。あっちもてめえとは合わねえとよ。 いい機会じゃねえか。気に食わないんなら試合で片付けてやれよ。こっちも本気でやってやるから。
Toymaru calmly punched back down at Konami while practicing his pitching at the wall. He was throwing harder than usual. Maybe he was angry because of that home run he gave up earlier. He was in Class A and had taken on the role of captain for other boys from Class A who showed up to play.
ちょっと待った。そりゃ誤解だぜ、殿下。俺たち木の実結構好きよ。バカなところとか、平気で女連中の品評会開くところとか、合コン企画するところとか、真似できねえよ、ほんと。
They're describing a sleazeball, which he is, but still. Oh, he's
ざけんな。てめえらいつも美味しいところだけ持っていきやがって。
all the other boys in Class A nodded affirmatively.
カラオケ会開いてよ。女の子と遊びたいよ。なんて甘えてきやがって。なんで気がついたら俺一人だけで会計してたの。一緒にテニス部覗きに行ったのに、どうして俺だけ悪者なの。もしかして利用されてるだけってそろそろ気がついていいの。やべ、まだ気づいてなかった。本物だ。
ごめん。木の実のおかげで僕にも彼女ができました。彼女の口癖は木の実くんよりマシよで
Oh,
す。
that's mean.
てめえら本気でムカつく。青くせえ学生生活を送ってんじゃねえ。
Konami took his bat and swung it around as he chased after the boys in Class A. They seemed to be having fun running from him while sarcastically thanking him. That's so mean. Oh my gosh. One of Konami's best virtues is always his ability to remain good-natured in the face of insults.
木の実は人気者だな。
Poor
あ
Kenobi.
バカなのが救いだな。あれで下手に利口だったら犯罪者になってるところだ。
Yeah, no, literally, he has the mind of a schemer.
いや、その前に今度こそ青崎に締められるか。あいつ小ずるいチンピラには容赦ねえからな。
Yokoso.
そうなのか。今度こそ。
Souyjuro fell deep in thought. From the way it sounded, Konami seemed to have some kind of history with Kawasaki.
木の実は青崎にその消そうしてたことがあるのか。
あ、消そう。あ、消そうか。あのバカにそんな風情があるかって。ちょいとな。青崎と木の実には条件反射じみた事件があったんだよ。ありゃ入学式のことだ。そうだよな、木の実。
Konami froze and glanced back at Tobimaru's provocation.
ああ、入学式な。すげえ体してる女子がいたからさ、つい声をかけたんだよな。
What?
彼女どのクラスって。いやでもまさか手が出るとは思わなかった。俺的には1センチ前で寸止めしようとしたんだけど、憶測を誤った。俺の視覚情報より青崎の肉体のサイズがやや勝っていたということさね。
Konami laughed loudly as he gazed up at the sky. That was all the explanation Souyjuro needed to know what really happened that day at the entrance ceremony.
バカな。なぜ命がある木の実。
だろう。俺の顎垂直に跳ね上がったんだぜ。平手とか拳とかそういうレベルじゃねえの。下からギャーンだぜ、ギャーン。周りにいたギャラリー曰く、プールで縦に沈めたビート板が浮上するように青崎の靴がひらめいたらしい。今だから言いますけど、俺あの後の記憶がすっぽりないのです。
Rubbing his jaw, Konami returned to their side, tired of wasting his energy chasing after the Class A boys.
そんなことより遊びに行こうぜ。殿下金持ってるだろう。おごってくれよ。
たく、まあ映画なら考えないこともない。ちょうど見たい映画あんだよ。 映画の内容より見終わった後に文句言い合う方が楽しい部類の B 級でな。犠牲者が必要なんで、この際てめえでもいいぞ。
やだ、映画とかつまんねえよ。大の男がさ、2時間も同じところ座ってられねえって。そんなんだったらゲーセンかコンビニの駐車場で駄菓子食ってる方が楽しいって。
お前、それ今の状況と何が違うんだ？
That is true.
いいんだよ、外でだべってれば楽しいんだって。あ、それともバンドでもやるか。今 UK ロックが熱い。バイト先の先輩にパンクロックなら誰でもできると聞いた。
ああ、そうかよ。ファッションにならねえようにな。
This is the weird courtyard during winter vacation. Konami and Souyjuro spent their relaxing reprieve chattering away about nothing of much substance.
じゃあナンパ、駅前でナンパしようぜ。殿下がいれば年上のお姉さんも釣れるし。そうだ、お金がないならレディーたちにおごってもらえばいいんじゃない？
その年で紐か。てめえの人生設計明るすぎて頭痛がするぜ。
俺将来の展望だけはできてるからね。なあしずき、お前からも言ってやれよ。ナンパに行こうって、女の子たちと楽しく騒ごうって。殿下は立ってるだけでいいし、しずきだって年上のお姉さんから見たら弟属性っていうの。うまくいけばこう、俺の時みたいに1時間後には一冬のアバンチュール。
Konami's hands are floating around in excitement, dancing around like so many waving tentacles. What? Huh. Like I understand the comparison. That's a weird comparison. His mind was apparently still swimming in the memories of a golden time he once had.
ヒノミ、
Anyway.
その時なんて言ったんだ？
え？ああ、その時の決め台詞ね。お姉さん綺麗っすね。俺そこのビルのオーナーの息子なんすけど、ちょっと遊んでいきませんって。嘘だってバレたら逃げられたけどな。
そうじゃなくて入学式。
あ、そっちか。青崎の首から下の部分に向かって、うわ、お前胸でかくね？
Wow. Of course he said that. He let out a loud guffaw as he recalled his story. His lack of intelligence and propriety were truly remarkable, or rather mind-boggling. Nonetheless, Konami was now in high spirits after recalling this exciting memory. Conversely, Souyjuro was standing in complete sullen silence.
どうしたしずき？あ、やっぱりナンパとか興味ないか。
当たり前だ。てめえみたいな色ボケと総十郎を一緒にするな。
いや、興味はある。
Oh.
可愛い女の子は可愛いと思うし、たまに薄着なところに出くわすと目のやり場に困るだろう。ああいう時、自分が男だってことを実感するよ。
Okay, so I know what he's saying, because it's like, it's just the way that he said it sounds really strange. Because inherently it is strange. Like, if you're like Souyjuro, especially if you're a teenager, and a woman happens to be there who has some quote unquote revealing clothing, his eyes would inherently go there because of inherent instinct. Some people aren't like that, and that's perfectly fine because that's normal. Well, it's not normal. That's good. That's actually really good because then that means that you're not leering by accident. But it's like, oh, this just sounds so creepy. His words shot through the air like a bolt of lightning. It was as shocking as when a kid sees the head of a character and an amusing fart fall off, revealing the person inside.
そりゃそうだよな。すまん、見くびっていた。つまりしずきも俺たちの同志ってことでいいんだな。
同志？
そうだ。例えばこう夏場の女子のうなじに光る汗とか、 テニス部の女子の肩から脇にかけての清涼感とか、ぶっちゃけ水泳部の競泳水着の後ろ姿だよ。
Yeah, no, there's a difference between what Soujuro said and Kanomi. Because Kanomi's legit just a pervert. What do you mean the sweat rolling down the nape of a girl's neck in the summer heat? That's legit just perversion. Yeah, like, that's different. Sojuro's eyes were filled with question marks. Apparently he hadn't quite understood Kanomi's explanation.
いやだから普段は同い年のガキにしか見えない女どもでもたまに見せる無防備な仕草とかグッとくるよな。
無防備なのはちょっと考えてほしい。
Whether it was because Soujuro was unsure if Kanomi was referring to someone in particular, or whether he was just concerned about how this related to him, a troubled look washed over his face.
いいんだって、それでいいんだって。なぜなら高校生男子の6割は性欲でできていますからね。
Unfortunately, like, not statistically, but like, unfortunately, he's not wrong. Teenage boys are horny. They're really like
よし、
freaks.
そう決まれば早速ナンパに行こうぜ。メンツが変われば超過も変わるってもんだ。
And with that, he happily put his arm around Sojuro's shoulders and headed off towards the station.
ちょっと待て。あまりのことに絶句しちまったが、てめえは根本的に間違ってる。宗次郎、そもそもナンパって言葉が何なのか知ってるか？
Question. Define pickup. To answer a telephone call, to recite a Shakespearean work, to transfer someone from one place to another, to pay someone's bill, to try and persuade someone to have a romantic relationship. I didn't know two was an actual. I didn't know that was real. One, you know, to pick up a phone. Two, to pick someone up. Three is to pick someone up. 4, to pick up a bill. And 5, to pick up some chicks. Yeah.
2番か。
Is that what Toby Maru said? Wrong. 9 times out of 10, when a bunch of high schoolers are talking about picking up girls, they mean definition number 5.
ほら見ろ。てめえとは興味の度合いが違うんだよ。
I can't believe bro said Shakespearean. Oh no.
女引っかけに行くなら一人で行け。なあ、あと岬の駅前はやめとけよ。うちの評判が悪くなるから。ナンパなら隣町でやりやがれ。
Tobimaru waved his hand at Kanomi as if he was shooing away at a pest. Kanomi clicked his tongue in frustration and removed his arm from around Sojuro's shoulders.
くそ面白くねえ。はいよ、おとなしく野球やってますよ。いつの間にか俺たちの番が回ってきたみたいだし。
Alright, 2.5 hours, yeah. Let's see how far I am when I finish this one. He complained all the way to the pitcher's mound. Soujuro looked on regretfully.
おい、まさか本気でナンパに行きたかったのか？
いや、ナンパはよくわからないけど、街には用があったんだ。ちょっと欲しいものがあって。そうだ、飛び丸。生徒会室にあるあの白いやつ、どこに行けば買えるか知ってるか？
Soujuro spread his arms wide, making a bizarre gesture. 1 hour later, at the department store in front of the station, Tobimaru was so confused after he figured out what Soujuro wanted to buy.
しかし、なんだってこんなもの？
No. Alright. The Koenji estate was surprisingly comfortable for all 3 of his occupants this evening. Maybe it was because the dinner Alice had prepared was so wonderful.
7回？アリスの実家じゃ1日に7回も食事をとるのか？
That is pretty insane.
一体どうやって？
Soujuro asked Alice this question in the sunroom from the 3rd sofa, brought up from the mansion's basement by himself.
食事をとっているわけじゃないわ。ティータイムは1日7回行うのが理想というだけ。
Why?
寝起きのアーリー、 朝食のブレックファースト、午前のイレブンジズ、午後のミディティーブレイク、午後の社交会アフタヌーン、夜会のハイティー、ディナー後のアフターディナー。
That's so much tea.
この中で食事に該当するのはハイティーだけよ。田舎での話だけれど。
High tea. Alice was enjoying her black tea by herself in the sunroom. She was drinking a royal blend, a fine blend of Darjeeling, Ceylon, and some orange pekoe tea. Wow, that's so hard to pronounce. Hold on. How do you pronounce it, good sir? Darjeeling? What? Darjeeling. Yeah, Darjeeling, alright. And what about Ceylon? Or is it Keelan? Oh, is it Keelan? What? Ceylon. Wow. I said it completely wrong. Darjeeling, Ceylon, and Assam. Yep. All like Indian slash Middle Eastern. No, not is it Middle Eastern? Because Sri Lanka I don't think is Sri Lanka in the Middle East? Let's see. Is Sri Lanka, because it could be like in Asia. I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, I apologize. Assam is not in the Middle East. It's in, excuse me, not Assam. I'm so sorry. Sri Lanka. It's in South Asia. That's not. It's really disrespectful. I'm so sorry. There's yearling, Ceylon, and Assam orange pekoe tea leaves. To accompany her tea, she has some strawberries dipped in sugar. Strawberries dipped in sugar? She was in a world of her own.
つまり一日中お茶を飲んでいるのか?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
そうね。そう暮らせるのなら理想的ね。
She couldn't understand why this was so hard for Souyjuro to grasp. Alice picked up a strawberry with her slender fingers and carried it to her mouth, as if she were going to give it a kiss. Souyjuro was briefly transfixed by the graceful sight and shook his head to clear his thoughts. He had become slightly too sensitive to the fact that they were indeed of the opposite sex, perhaps due to his conversation earlier that day.
でもその口ぶりだとアリスは7回できてないんだ。
3回が限度よ。相方が未熟だからやらなくちゃいけないことが増えてしまって。
相方。
Souyjuro turned to look to his side. There he saw.
何よ、1日3回も開いてれば上出来じゃない。うちの生徒会なんて黙ってお茶飲んでるだけよ。いちいち鍋からお湯沸かしてポット使ってたっぷり蒸らすなんて3時のおやつと夕食後だけで十分でしょ。アリスは手間をかけすぎ。私贅沢は好きだけど贅沢になれるのはごめんだから。
Even though Alka was arguing, she still seemed to be in a good mood.
贅沢なのは青子たちの方よ。日本の水道水はこんなにも美味しいのに。どうし
Delicious.
てあなたたちはこの黄金の価値に気づかないのかしら。1日7回もお茶会開く国民性じゃないからでしょ。気をつけなさいね、宗十郎。美味しい紅茶を入れようとしてペットボトルの水なんて買ってきたらアリスに1時間近くお説教されるから。
It was true that better water should make a better cup of a cup of tea. That was why Alka went out and bought bottles of natural spring water as soon as she moved into the Koonji estate. Proud show and tell to Alice had led to their first petty argument. The two were exhausted after quarreling about something one would think wasn't necessarily as significant as magecraft.
青崎さん、夕食を作る気力残ってる？
パス。主義に反するけど、てんやものを頼んでみよう。
And that had been their first time ordering from a soba noodle shop by phone. Their slovenly attitude toward household chores had only accelerated since then.
いやー、あの後は悔しくってお茶について調べまくったもんだわ。アリスに質問したり競い合ってたらいつの間にか私も紅茶党の仲間入りよ。私、姉貴の影響で中学までコーヒー党だったのに。
そこには感謝しているわ。青子が連れ出してくれなかったらコープランドのアンティークカップに出会えなかったもの。
気がついたら骨董品回りしてたものね、去年の私たち。
Drawing room in a sunroom. Though they were not even in the same room, the two were enjoying a fun, lively conversation nonetheless. Souyjuro wondered why they didn't just sit together and chat in the drawing room since they got along so well. He didn't yet understand the physical distance between them made those stories of old memories more meaningful.
アリスは外に出ない子だったんだ。
ええ、この子ったらほんと屋内派で外に出るのは学校だけだったんだから。今日だってずっと洋館にいたんでしょ、アリス。
違うわ。外に用がないだけよ。今日はプロイの補充に忙しかっただけだし。
それだ。プロイの補充ってことは遊園地の時みたいなのはここで生まれてるのか？
Ever since that terrible incident, Souyjuro had been sensitive whenever place came up. He'd only been worried about escaping with his life at the time. But as time passed, what were those mysterious things? He became filled with curiosity.
知りたい？宗十郎。
教えてくれるなら知りたいけど、いや、よく考えると聞かない方がいいような。やっぱり知りたいような。
よし、そういうことなら話してあげましょう。ちょっとした触りだけなら怒らないわよね、アリス。
Alka quickly recrossed her legs in anticipation.
私とあなたの違いを話すぐらいならいいけど。
よし、決まった。って何よあんた、妙な顔して。自分から言っておいて尻尾巻くの？
いや、そうではなく。
Souyjuro diverted his eyes at Alko's direct stare. Souyjuro and Alko currently only spent time together after dinner. Every once in a while, however, he would catch a glimpse of some innocent gesture of hers and wouldn't know how to
いいん
respond.
だ、続けてくれ。興味はある。
よし、じゃあコマ撮り呼ばないとね。それでは特別授業、なぜなにプロイキッシャー、始まり始まり。
Alko snapped her fingers. Apparently she was trying to mimic turning on the switch to a TV. It was a veritable TV special. That's how a lecture about a certain brand of magecraft, performed directly and directed by Alice Koonji, first aired. Unfortunately, special production was cancelled like 30 minutes after it began. Apparently the content had been a little too esoteric for Souyjuro.
分かってはいたけど、しずきくんの覚えの悪さは三千世界に響き渡るわね。
She almost said he was better off dead, but took a deep breath to avoid being hurtful. Oh,
かわい
that's
そう
sweet.
なアリス。さすがに今回は同情するわ。そいつにとっちゃ私の魔術もアリスの魔術もすごく便利でくくられちゃうものだなんて。他の魔術師が聞いたら失神者の屈辱よ。
Alka was exasperated. She also felt some measure of regret. She should have realized this would be the outcome.
そんなことはない。ちゃんと区別はつく。青崎は壊すだけで、アリスはいろんなものを作って、それで壊すんだよ。アリスの方がやや生産的だ。
Ooh, no.
怖いわ、青子。私、どうしてか胸が苦しい。こういうことって本当にあるのね。
Oh my gosh.
まるでお気に入りのカップを割ってしまった時通りかかったキリンにでもトロルよりマシですよと慰められた気分だわ。
どういう意味よそれ。
Alco glared at Alice sitting across from her. Alice had alluded to a fairy tale story about a less than intelligent giant who lived under a bridge.
今の宗十郎の指摘結構合ってると思うけど、私アリスのプロイが生活の役に立つとこ見たことないし、コマドリも双子も最後はドジって終わりじゃない。
それは結果論よ。役立とうという諸子は尊重するべきだわ。だいたいあれやそれが最後に全部台無しにするのは私の責任じゃないのだし。
Both girls were now just intent on calling the other out. It seemed neither wanted to admit their own shortcomings when it came to magecraft. Even when it came down to a silly argument about who was the worst at breaking
い
things.
やでもアリスの使い魔は役に立ってるぞ。前に森で落ち葉を集めている豚を見かけた。あれはアリスの使い魔なのになんで青崎に言ってやらないんだ。まあいいことをしたのに黙っているのは美徳だって山城先生は言ってたけど。
Alice had simply sent the chatty twins out in the forest to break them, as it were. The soldier, this does seem like a good deed. Hako was visibly getting more fed up with this conversation since Souyjuro had decided Alice was the victor here.
掃除をしているから生産的とかずいぶん小さな判断ですこと。
大きな視点。例えばお金儲けとか。
The two girls both try to remain calm and defuse such a direct question. Even a fool could think of such a good idea sometimes.
呆れた。我ながらその発想はなかったわ。盲点すぎたっていうか、基本魔術って損失しか生まないものだから。
Alice nodded affirmatively.
それで例えばあなたから見て私の魔術はどんな金策ができると思う？
青崎ならそうだな。マグロを捕まえるのはどうだろう。
Silence. Akko adjusted the position of her crossed legs.
なんでマグロ？
She asked this question seriously.
いや朝一で大変高価だと聞いた。でも捕まえるのは難しいって。あんな巨大なものが水の中では車より速く泳ぐと。
そりゃ地球が誇る大型肉食魚だからね。お寿司屋さんでも最強だし、平均時速60キロ、マックススピードは時速180キロに迫ると聞くわ。
部長曰く青崎は泳ぎがうまいって。泳いで捕まえられないか？
もう魔術関係ないわねそれ。仮にマダンで迎撃できたとしても保存できないわ。私回転を早めるのが専門で止めるのはちょっと。あり
魚は苦手。
I agree. I agree. Alice quietly added that some of them were oddly interesting to her, so she wouldn't feel comfortable harming them. Akko shrugged her shoulders, throwing that idea to the side.
ところで喧嘩売ってる？しずきくん。
すまない。実はちょっとからかってみた。
What is she doing to him? The collar around his neck tightened for a Okay, that's what it was. Never mind. The collar around his neck tightened for a good 5 seconds. It was as tight as the goodness. It was as tight as the sleeper hold.
青崎には乱暴なことしか期待できないとして、アリスはどうなんだ？何も言わないということは魔術でお金儲けは気に入らない？
そうね。好き嫌いはともかくお金があるのはいいことだわ。教会の目をくぐり抜けることができるなら青子には頑張ってほしい。
危ない目に遭うのは私だけか。アリスのプロにはなんかないの？土食べたら金に変換するようなカバとか。ほら中世の貴族はお抱えの錬金術師で日夜金を作り出す研究をしてたって言うじゃない。
あれはただの金食い虫。まあ騙した貴族たちの貯蓄を食いつぶして新しい技術を生み出したから無意味ではなかったけど、このマイセンももともとは金を作ると豪語した錬金術師が苦し紛れに生んだ時期なわけだし。
Alice ran a finger along the edge of the teacup in her hand.
はあ、錬金術師ほど当てにならないやつはいないってわけか。今じゃプラハの錬金術師は証券魔術師、エジプトの方は兵器作ってるって話だしね。
ええ、ちょっと期待してしまったけど、もともと私たちは現実社会と折り合いが悪いのよ。ロンドンの名門になると家訓と授業は別物と割り切っていて、金融専門の弟子を取っているわ。噂だけど、ある財閥の総帥は社員全員の血を吸って情報を共有するネットワークを作っているとか。何でも吸血鬼になった理由が精神的につながった決して内部闘争しない紹介を作りたいからだったとか。
極まってるな。要はそこまで徹底しないと魔術でお金儲けは難しいってことか。あ、アリスのプロイで遊園地をやるのはどう？
Souyjuro clapped his hands together in excitement.
それはいい。襲われるのはもうゴリゴリだけど、あの遊園地なら連日連夜大盛況だ。
私のプロイを見せ物にする気？
でも大受けよ、絶対。ロボットって言い張ればみんな騙されるし。
却下よ青子。この話もう一度したら絶好だから。
本気で怒らせたか。だってさ、宗十郎、遊園地は諦めましょう。今度こそ友情を失っちゃうし。
I'll go back down after Alice's cold rejection of the idea. The small talk continued, but the girls grew more distant as they tried to avoid further conflict. Souyjuro looked at the two with a perplexed expression.
ちょっといいかな。今猛烈に気になったんだが。
何？
いや、青崎もアリスも遊園地で本気で殺し合っただろう。それなのにまだ友達だったのか。
It was certainly a rude question, really. But it was an obvious thing to ask. Akko and Alice looked at each other as they thought of the answer. They stared at each other for about 2 seconds.
ギリギリあり？
まあギリギリ。
ありなんだ。
Though their friendship was surprisingly lighthearted, it also seemed to be forged from bonds harder than steel. Oh, it's not over yet. Their long and extended tea party had just started to get going when Souyjuro had to leave. He didn't really want to since he was enjoying himself, but couldn't miss his part-time job.
時間も話してたなんて珍しいわね。アリスもいつになく饒舌だったし。
成り行きよ。しずきくんがあれこれ青子に質問して、あなたがそれを私にも向けてきただけ。と、私たちが一日何をしているのかなんて聞いても仕方がないのに。
いや、それがそうでもない。大変役に立ちました。
はい？
Souyjuro was carrying something down the hallway, ignoring Alka's surprise. It was a large whiteboard, much like the one in the student council room. On a shiny new board was written, chores list, mansion cleaning, first floor east wing only, breakfast, dinner, cleaning the bath.
なんかいろいろと詮索してくると思ったら、そういう裏があったわけ？
うん。歪みを正したかったら、まずどこがおかしいのか知らないといけないからね。今夜の話じゃ、2人とも1日に1時間ぐらいは使える時間があるみたいだし、3人で1つの台所を使ってるんだから、ローテーションを組んだ方がいいだろう。
Souyjuro was clearly proud of his attempt to make things better around here.
待って。私はあなたを住まわせているだけで、協力なんてする気はないって言ったでしょ。
うん言ったね。でも夕食を用意するなら私の分もお願いと言いたいのなら相互扶助は当然の義務だと思うんだ。あと3人で食費を集めればその分美味しいものが食べられるよ。
Sojiro's words pierced Alice's heart. She knew she had asked him to make dinner for her on many occasions. It was a carefully planned attack designed to make her repent for her sins, and she knew it.
でもホワイトボードを用意することはないんじゃない？当番なんて今まで口約束で決めてきたんだし。
Alice nodded her agreement. There was nothing less reliable in this world than a verbal promise. Even if they didn't say so, Soujiro could tell by the look on their faces that they intended to skip out on whatever task they were assigned to do.
ダメだ。正しい生活を送るには正しい役割を把握しないと。こういう風に書いておけば後になっても忘れないだろう。
Alko recalled at this new development. She couldn't tell if Soujiro was just being nice or if he was saying he wouldn't tolerate any slackers.
なんてこと。証明文を書かせて責任の所在を明らかにしようだなんて。
Alice was absolutely terrified at the prospect of daily. Yo, these guys are so lazy. Oh my gosh.
誰がどこを担当するかはまた明日話し合おう。今の2人が大変なのは分かってるからしばらくの間はこっちが多めに受け持つよ。
And with that, Soujiro left. The two girls left behind could only sit and stare, staring at the shiny new whiteboard.
こういうのを飼い犬に手を噛まれるというのかしら。割と
Aw, dang it.
私あいつがそういうやつって知ってたわ。
こういうのを飼い犬に手を噛まれるというのかしら。割と小酌な性格をしていたのね、彼。
But now it was too late. They had already been caught in a trap. Just this morning, Alka had received a portion of the salad Soujiro prepared. She knew it would be wrong for her to veto the idea of them all helping each other out. The concept of dividing up the specific chores made perfect sense to Alko after all. Even so, she wanted to be able to tip the ratio of chores in her favor, at least sometimes.
青子、あなた何を考えているか丸分かりよ。
そうでしょうとも。間違いなく同じことを考えてたからね、私たち。
Alko sighed as she grabbed the whiteboard. He was gonna hang it up in the kitchen so they could all see it. Alice was still staring at the whiteboard blankly.
せめて新しい項目が増えなければいいけど。
She would come to regret ever saying those words. Oh. Chapter 8. Oh. What the heck? What is this? Oh, there you go. The Wonderful World of Ploys. I wonder. The Carnegie case. Oh, this is what my friend was talking about. Alright. So one of my friends earlier, I think earlier in the week, he was telling me about a special chapter that we have here. This was the one he was talking about. And I have to read these. I have to read these next stream. The next stream I do. These two I'm going to have to read. I'm probably going to start with the ploys and then go to the Carnegie case. But, we'll see. But, yeah, no, Chapter 8 is done. Wow, okay, that's crazy. But, we're here. We're making our way through the game. Not a lot left. Not a lot left. So, I'm excited. But, yeah, no, shoot. I know I already saved, but gonna save again. There you go. But yeah, no. So shoot, I'm gonna end it here for now. Thank you all so much for watching. This was it was not 5 hours. You're bugging out, bro. What are you talking about? Let me see if I can get the accurate time. Yeah, almost 3 hours. Almost 3 hours. Which, it's fine. I did a long stream for you guys. Got through a chapter and everything. So, well, hopefully you enjoyed it. But if not, it's cool too. But I'll see you all in the next video, next stream, either one, you know, whichever comes first. But until next time, this has been Infamous Isaac, and I hope you all have a great rest of your night. Peace. Here.